General Marcus Thompson had seen 3 wars, commanded thousands of soldiers, and made decisions that shaped the fate of nations. But nothing in his decorated military career had prepared him for what would happen on a rainy Thursday morning at Fort Braxton, when he walked past a young woman sitting alone on a bench outside the commissary. He barely glanced at her as he strode by, his mind focused on the urgent briefing waiting for him across the base. It was his aide, Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Martinez, who whispered those 5 words that would change everything. "Sir, that's Rebecca Chen's daughter." Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The name hit him like a physical blow. Rebecca Chen, a name he hadn't spoken aloud in 23 years. A name that carried with it the weight of secrets, sacrifice, and a promise he thought he'd never have to keep. The morning had started like any other at Fort Braxton. General Thompson rose at 0500 hours, completed his standard 5-mile run through the pine forest surrounding the base, and arrived at his office by 0630 to review intelligence reports from overseas operations. At 58, he maintained the same rigorous discipline that had carried him from a fresh-faced second lieutenant in the deserts of Iraq to his current position as commanding general of one of America's most strategic military installations. Lieutenant Colonel Martinez knocked on his door at precisely 0800. She was a sharp officer from San Antonio, Texas, who had earned her position through exceptional performance in both combat zones and Pentagon briefings. Her loyalty to Thompson was absolute, forged through 2 deployments where they had navigated impossible situations together. "General, the SecDef briefing has been moved up to 0930, she announced, adjusting her crisp uniform jacket. "Intelligence suggests unusual activity along the eastern border. They need your assessment before the afternoon Joint Chiefs meeting." Thompson nodded, gathering the classified folders from his desk. The weight of command never left his shoulders, but today felt different somehow. There was an electricity in the air, a sense that something significant was about to shift. He attributed it to the geopolitical tensions that had been escalating for weeks. They walked across the base together, past the training facilities where young soldiers practiced combat maneuvers, past the motor pool where mechanics serviced armored vehicles, past the barracks where the next generation of America's defenders prepared for whatever challenges awaited them. Fort Braxton sprawled across 15,000 acres of North Carolina countryside, a city unto itself with its own schools, hospitals, and communities. The commissary sat at the heart of the base, a gathering place where military families shopped for groceries and supplies. It was there, on the weathered wooden bench outside the main entrance, that she sat. Emily Chen was 22 years old, though the weight she carried made her seem older. Her black hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore civilian clothes, jeans and a navy blue sweater that had seen better days. She clutched a worn manila envelope in her hands, the edges frayed from nervous handling. Her eyes, dark and intelligent, scanned every passing uniform with desperate hope. She had been waiting for 3 hours. General Thompson's stride was purposeful as always, his attention fixed on the briefing materials he needed to review before the SecDef call. In his peripheral vision, he registered the young woman on the bench the way he might notice any other detail of his daily environment, present but unremarkable. His mind was already in the secure conference room, analyzing satellite imagery and troop movements. But Martinez saw something else entirely. As Thompson's aide-de-camp, she had access to personnel files, security clearances, and historical records that painted a fuller picture of the general's distinguished career. She knew about his decorated service in Operation Desert Storm, his leadership during the initial phases of Operation Iraqi Freedom, and his later assignments in Afghanistan, where he had helped establish training programs for local forces. What she also knew, buried deep in classified files that required the highest security clearance to access, was the story of Operation Nightingale. 23 years earlier, then Colonel Thompson had been part of a joint task force operating in Southeast Asia. The mission, officially designated as a training exercise, was actually a covert operation designed to extract a high-value intelligence asset who had been feeding crucial information to American forces for over 2 years. The asset was Dr. Rebecca Chen, a brilliant communications engineer who had risked everything to help prevent a devastating terrorist attack on American soil. The extraction had gone wrong in every possible way. Instead of a clean pickup, Thompson's team had found themselves in a firefight that lasted 14 hours. Dr. Chen had been wounded, and in those final moments before the helicopter arrived, she had pressed something into Thompson's hands, a small silver locket containing a photograph of a baby girl. "If something happens to me," Rebecca had whispered through gritted teeth as medics worked to stop her bleeding, "promise me you'll watch over Emily. Promise me she'll know she's not alone in this world." Thompson had made that promise, believing he would see Rebecca again once she recovered from her injuries. But complications had set in during the flight to the medical facility. Dr. Rebecca Chen died over the Pacific Ocean, taking with her secrets that could have destabilized governments and the trust of a man who had never broken his word to anyone. The official records listed her death as a training accident. The truth remained classified at levels that few people would ever be cleared to know. Thompson had tried to locate the child, Emily, but Rebecca's family had disappeared into the vast network of immigrant communities scattered across America, protective and suspicious of any government inquiry. For 23 years, Thompson had carried the weight of that unfulfilled promise. He had risen through the ranks, commanded thousands of soldiers, made decisions that affected global security, but always in the back of his mind was the image of that photograph. A baby girl whose mother had died, believing that someone would watch over her. Now Martinez looked at the young woman on the bench and saw the unmistakable features that connected her to that classified file, that tragic night, and the promise her commanding officer had been unable to keep. Emily Chen had grown up believing her mother died in a car accident when she was 18 months old. She had been raised by her maternal grandmother in a small apartment in Seattle, Washington, where the elderly woman worked 2 jobs to keep them afloat. Her grandmother had spoken little about Emily's mother, saying only that Rebecca had been a brilliant woman who loved her daughter more than life itself. But 3 weeks ago, her grandmother had passed away, and while sorting through decades of carefully preserved belongings, Emily had discovered a hidden compartment in an old jewelry box. Inside were documents that turned her understanding of her life upside down. Military correspondence, newspaper clippings about training accidents that didn't add up, and most shocking of all, a letter in her mother's handwriting addressed to General Marcus Thompson, Fort Braxton, North Carolina. The letter was never sent, but its contents revealed a connection Emily never knew existed. Her mother had written about her work, about dangers she couldn't fully explain, and about her hope that if anything happened to her, Thompson would ensure Emily knew the truth about who her mother really was and why her sacrifice had mattered. Armed with this revelation and the last of her savings, Emily had made the journey from Seattle to North Carolina. She had no appointment, no official channels to go through, no guarantee that General Thompson would even see her. All she had was a letter her mother never sent, and the desperate need to understand the truth about her family's past. As Thompson walked past the bench, Martinez felt the weight of recognition settle over her. She had memorized enough classified files to know a connection when she saw one, and the resemblance between the young woman and the photograph in Rebecca Chen's personnel file was unmistakable. The words hit Thompson like a sniper's bullet to the chest. He stopped mid-stride, his hand instinctively moving to steady himself against the nearest wall. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Routines, the mechanical sounds of military efficiency. But for Thompson, everything had suddenly gone silent, except for the thundering of his own heartbeat. "What did you say?" His voice came out barely above a whisper. Martinez stepped closer, her trained eyes already scanning the area for potential security concerns. "Sir, the young woman on the bench. Her identification documents show Emily Chen, age 22, from Seattle. The facial recognition software I ran this morning flagged a 94% match to archived personnel files." Thompson's mind raced through tactical assessments even as emotional shock threatened to overwhelm him. If Emily Chen was here, it meant the carefully constructed barriers that had protected classified information for over 2 decades were potentially compromised. It meant someone had connected dots that were supposed to remain forever scattered. Most importantly, it meant the daughter of the woman who had died in his arms was sitting 50 yards away, and he had just walked past her without recognition. How long has she been waiting? Thompson's military bearing returned as training overrode personal turmoil. Security logs show she arrived at 0630 this morning. "She's been on that bench for almost 3 hours, sir." Base security questioned her twice, but she has valid identification and claims she was waiting to meet someone. No appointment on record. Thompson closed his eyes for a moment, seeing Rebecca's face as clearly as if 23 years were 23 seconds. The fierce determination in her eyes as she passed him that locket, the weight of her final words, the promise he had carried like shrapnel in his chest ever since. He turned and began walking back toward the commissary, his pace deliberate, but urgent. Martinez fell into step beside him, her hand instinctively resting near her sidearm, not from any perceived threat, but from the sudden tension radiating from her commanding officer. Emily saw them approaching before they reached her. She had studied enough photographs online to recognize General Thompson, though seeing him in person was different. He was taller than she had expected, with silver hair that caught the morning light, and eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of his surroundings. There were lines around those eyes that spoke of difficult decisions and sleepless nights, the kind of weathering that came from carrying responsibility for other people's lives. She stood as they approached, the manila envelope clutched against her chest like armor. Her grandmother had always told her to stand straight when meeting important people, advice that seemed both crucial and inadequate for this moment. Miss Chen. Thompson's voice carried the authority of command, but Emily detected something else underneath. Uncertainty, perhaps even vulnerability. I'm General Thompson. I understand you've been waiting to see me. Yes, sir. Emily's voice was steadier than she felt. I know you don't know me, but I think you knew my mother. Rebecca Chen. The name hung in the air between them like a bridge across decades. Thompson studied Emily's face, seeing features that transported him instantly back to that classified operation, to intelligence briefings where Rebecca's sharp mind had provided insights that saved American lives, to the moment when everything went wrong and courage became sacrifice. I think we should continue this conversation somewhere more private, Thompson said, glancing around at the increasing foot traffic as the base came fully to life. Lieutenant Colonel Martinez, would you escort Miss Chen to Conference Room Delta? I'll join you in 5 minutes. Martinez nodded, understanding the subtext. Conference Room Delta was in the intelligence wing, soundproof and secure, where sensitive conversations could happen without risk of compromise. Yes, sir. Miss Chen, if you would follow me, please. As they walked away, Thompson remained standing outside the commissary, his mind working through implications and possibilities. If Emily Chen had sought him out after 23 years, something significant had changed. Either someone had leaked classified information, or Emily had discovered something on her own that had led her to his door. Both possibilities presented security risks that extended far beyond personal obligations. He pulled out his secure phone and made 2 quick calls. The first was to his intelligence officer, requesting an immediate background check on Emily Chen with priority flags for any security concerns. The second was to the base legal officer, inquiring about protocols for declassifying information related to historical operations. He had a feeling that keeping his promise to Rebecca might require navigating regulations that had been designed to prevent exactly this kind of revelation. Meanwhile, in Conference Room Delta, Emily sat across from Martinez, who maintained the professional courtesy that military officers showed to civilian visitors while clearly remaining alert to any potential security issues. The room was sterile and intimidating, with its secure communications equipment and maps showing global military operations. "Can I offer you some coffee or water while we wait for the general?" Martinez asked. "Water would be good, thank you." Emily's mouth felt dry as desert sand. She had rehearsed this moment countless times during the cross-country bus ride from Seattle, but now that it was actually happening, all her planned words seemed insufficient. Martinez returned with a bottle of water and took her seat again. "Miss Chen, may I ask what brought you to Fort Braxton? It's quite a journey from Seattle." Emily unscrewed the cap with hands that trembled slightly. "My grandmother passed away 3 weeks ago. While I was going through her things, I found some papers. Documents about my mother. They mentioned General Thompson." "I'm sorry for your loss," Martinez said, and Emily could tell the sympathy was genuine, despite the professional circumstances. "Thank you. My grandmother raised me after my mother died when I was a baby. She always said it was a car accident. But the papers I found, they suggest something different, something involving the military." Martinez kept her expression neutral, but her mind was already connecting the implications. If Emily had discovered classified information through family documents, it represented a security breach that would require immediate investigation. If she had pieced together the truth through other means, it suggested investigative capabilities that could pose ongoing risks. Thompson entered the room with the bearing of a man who had made his decision. He carried a slim folder that Emily suspected contained information about her mother, about connections she was only beginning to understand. "Miss Chen," he said, taking the seat across from her. "Before we continue, I need to ask you some questions about how you came to be here and what you hope to accomplish." Emily nodded, setting the manila envelope on the table between them. "I brought everything I found, letters my mother apparently wrote but never sent, newspaper clippings about military training accidents. And this." She opened the envelope and withdrew a small silver locket, the same one Rebecca had pressed into Thompson's hands 23 years earlier. The metal had tarnished with age, but the photograph inside remained clear. A baby girl with dark eyes and a smile that could light up the world. Thompson's composure cracked for just a moment as he recognized the locket, remembered the weight of it in his palm as Rebecca's life slipped away. Emily noticed the recognition immediately. "You've seen this before," she said. It wasn't a question. Thompson looked at Martinez, then back at Emily. The moment had arrived when 23 years of classified silence would have to give way to the truth, or at least as much truth as national security would allow. "Yes," he said quietly. "I have seen it before. Your mother gave it to me the night she died." The silence that followed Thompson's admission stretched like a taut wire between them. Emily's hand moved instinctively to the locket, her fingers tracing the worn silver surface as if it could somehow bridge the gap between the mother she never knew and the man who held the keys to understanding her family's hidden history. "She was dying," Thompson continued, his voice carrying the weight of memories he had buried under decades of military protocol. "But even then, her last thoughts were of you. She made me promise that if anything happened to her, I would make sure you knew you weren't alone in this world." Emily's eyes filled with tears she had been holding back since discovering those documents in her grandmother's jewelry box. "What really happened to her?" "The official records say training accident, but the dates don't match up with what my grandmother told me, and there are gaps in the story that never made sense." Thompson glanced at Martinez, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. She had already run the preliminary security clearance protocols and determined that certain declassified information could be shared without compromising ongoing operations. "Your mother was Dr. Rebecca Chen, one of the most brilliant communications engineers the military ever worked with," Thompson began, choosing his words carefully. "She volunteered for a classified assignment that put her in extraordinary danger because she believed the intelligence she could gather would save American lives." Quote, Emily leaned forward, hungry for details that would help her understand the woman who had given birth to her. "What kind of assignment?" "She posed as a civilian contractor working on telecommunications infrastructure in Southeast Asia. In reality, she was identifying and mapping terrorist communication networks that were being used to plan attacks on American targets. The work required her to maintain deep cover for over 2 years, with minimal contact with her handlers." Thompson paused, remembering intelligence briefings where Rebecca's reports had provided crucial insights into enemy operations. Her technical expertise had been matched only by her courage in maintaining her cover despite increasing suspicion from hostile forces. "The extraction was supposed to be routine," he continued, "a simple pickup at a predetermined location, but someone had compromised the operation. When we arrived, we found ourselves in the middle of a coordinated ambush." Emily's hands gripped the edge of the table. "She was hurt in the fighting?" "She was wounded covering our retreat to the extraction point. Even injured, she continued to provide tactical intelligence that helped us get out alive. It was during those final moments, while we were waiting for medical evacuation, that she gave me the locket and made me promise to watch over you." Martinez cleared her throat softly. "Sir, the medical records from that operation were declassified last year as part of the historical review process. Miss Chen has a right to know the complete circumstances." Thompson nodded grimly. "Your mother survived the initial wounds. The medical team stabilized her for transport, and she was conscious during most of the flight back to the field hospital. But there were complications with internal bleeding that the field medics hadn't detected. She went into cardiac arrest over the Pacific Ocean, and despite 40 minutes of resuscitation efforts, we lost her." Emily closed her eyes, finally understanding the heroic truth behind her mother's death. The car accident story had been a cover, designed to protect both Emily and the classified nature of her mother's sacrifice. "Her last words were about you," Thompson said quietly. She wanted me to tell you that everything she did was to help build a safer world for you to grow up in. She wanted you to know that she was proud to be your mother, even though she wouldn't be there to see you become the remarkable woman you clearly are. Quote, for several minutes, Emily couldn't speak. The emotions she had carried for 23 years, the questions about her mother, the sense of incompleteness, the nagging feeling that important pieces of her family's story were missing, finally had context and resolution. Why didn't you ever contact me? She asked finally. If you promised to watch over me, why did I grow up not knowing any of this? Thompson's expression grew heavy with regret. I tried. Immediately after the operation, I attempted to locate you and your grandmother through official channels. But your family had effectively disappeared into the immigrant community networks. Your grandmother was protecting you both from any government contact, probably suspecting that your mother's death involved classified circumstances. He opened the folder he had brought and withdrew several documents. These are copies of the search requests I filed, the private investigators I hired, the community outreach programs I funded in Seattle's Asian American neighborhoods. I spent years trying to fulfill that promise, but every lead went cold. Your grandmother did an exceptional job of keeping you safe and hidden. Emily examined the documents, seeing dates that spanned nearly a decade of unsuccessful search efforts. Her anger at his absence transformed into understanding of the impossible circumstances that had kept them apart. There's something else, Martinez interjected, consulting her tablet. General Thompson has been quietly funding a scholarship program at the University of Washington for children of military families who have lost parents in classified operations. The Rebecca Chen Memorial Scholarship has provided full tuition support for over 30 students in the past 15 years. Emily looked up sharply. My college scholarship? The one for children of government employees who died in service. That was named after your mother, yes. Thompson's voice carried quiet pride. It was the only way I could think of to honor her memory while still maintaining operational security. When I couldn't find you directly, I created opportunities that might eventually reach you if you chose to pursue higher education. The revelation hit Emily like a physical blow. The scholarship that had made her engineering degree possible, that had lifted her out of poverty and given her opportunities her grandmother could never have afforded, had been her mother's legacy working through Thompson's unfulfilled promise. I received that scholarship, she whispered. It changed my entire life. Your mother would be proud of what you've accomplished, Thompson said. You graduated summa cum laude with a degree in computer engineering, same field she specialized in. You're working for a cybersecurity firm in Seattle that protects critical infrastructure, continuing her work in a different form. Emily realized that her entire career path had been influenced by her mother's legacy in ways she had never understood. The scholarship had not only paid for her education, but had connected her with mentors and opportunities that shaped her professional development. What happens now? She asked. Thompson considered the question carefully. That depends on what you want to happen. The promise I made to your mother has been partially fulfilled through the scholarship program. But there's still the personal connection she wanted you to have. If you're interested, I'd like to share more stories about who she was, what she believed in, and how her work made a difference. Martinez added, there are also practical considerations. As the daughter of a classified operative, you're entitled to certain benefits and honors that were never processed because your identity couldn't be verified. We can arrange for those to be restored. Emily looked down at the locket again, then back at Thompson. I'd like to hear those stories. I've spent my whole life wondering who she was, and now I find out she was a hero. She was extraordinary, Thompson agreed. Brilliant, brave, and completely devoted to making the world safer for people like you. She would be amazed to see the woman you've become. For the first time since entering the conference room, Emily smiled. Thank you for keeping your promise, even when it took 23 years to fulfill it. Thompson stood and extended his hand. Welcome home, Emily. Your mother's sacrifice will never be forgotten, and neither will you. As they shook hands, Emily felt a sense of completion that had eluded her entire life. The missing pieces of her family's story were finally in place, and the promise made by a dying woman to a young colonel had finally been kept. The general who had walked past her on a bench outside the commissary was now the connection to her mother she had always needed, and the guardian angel who had been watching over her from a distance for over 2 decades. 3 hours later, Thompson led Emily through the restricted sections of Fort Braxton that most civilians never saw. They walked past the Intelligence Analysis Center where her mother's reports had once been processed, past the communications hub where encrypted messages from Operation Nightingale had been received, and finally to a memorial wall that honored fallen operatives whose sacrifices remained classified. "This is where we remember the ones who can't be publicly acknowledged," Thompson explained, stopping before a polished granite wall embedded with small bronze plaques. Each plaque bore only a name, date, and the simple inscription, "In service to country." Emily found her mother's plaque near the center of the wall, Dr. Rebecca Chen, 1975 to 2002, in service to country. Below the inscription was a small symbol, an eagle carrying an olive branch, the unofficial emblem of intelligence operatives who had died protecting civilian populations. "How many people know the truth about what she did?" Emily asked, tracing her mother's name with her fingertip. "Beyond the immediate operational team, perhaps 30 individuals worldwide still have access to the complete files," Thompson replied. "Presidents change, administrations shift, but the people who were there that night carry the memory forward." Martinez joined them at the memorial wall, carrying a leather portfolio that looked official and important. "Miss Chen, we've processed the paperwork for your mother's posthumous decorations. These were approved years ago but never presented because there was no next of kin on record." She opened the portfolio to reveal 3 military medals: the Defense Superior Service Medal, the Joint Service Commendation Medal, and most significantly, the Intelligence Community Medal of Honor, one of the rarest decorations in the American military system. "The Intelligence Community Medal is awarded to fewer than a dozen people each decade," Thompson explained. "Your mother earned it by maintaining her cover for over 2 years, while providing intelligence that prevented at least 3 major terrorist attacks on American soil. The information she gathered led to the disruption of funding networks that were supporting extremist cells across multiple continents." Emily held the medals carefully, feeling their weight both physical and symbolic. "Can you tell me about those attacks she prevented?" Thompson glanced around to ensure their conversation remained private. The largest was a planned assault on the Port of Los Angeles that would have disrupted shipping traffic for months and killed hundreds of dock workers. Your mother identified the communication patterns that revealed the timeline and target location. The second was a coordinated bombing campaign against subway systems in 3 major American cities. The third involved a cyber attack on the national power grid that could have left millions without electricity during winter months. "She saved all those lives," Emily whispered, the magnitude of her mother's sacrifice finally becoming clear. "Thousands of people are alive today because of her courage," Martinez added. "Families that never knew they were in danger, children who grew up safely, communities that remained intact. Your mother's legacy extends far beyond what we can measure." As they walked back toward the main administrative complex, Thompson's secure phone buzzed with an encrypted message. After reading it, he stopped abruptly. "Emily, there's something else you should know. The message I just received is from the Director of National Intelligence. Word has reached Washington that Rebecca Chen's daughter has been located. They want to offer you something that's never been offered to a civilian before." "What kind of offer?" "A position with the intelligence community. Your background in cybersecurity, combined with your family legacy and security clearance eligibility, makes you an ideal candidate for cyber warfare defense operations. It would mean following in your mother's footsteps in a way." Emily felt a chill of both excitement and apprehension. The idea of continuing her mother's work appealed to her sense of justice and family honor, but it also meant accepting the same risks that had ultimately cost Rebecca her life. "I need time to think about that," she said carefully. "Of course, it's not a decision to make lightly." Thompson's expression showed understanding of the complexity involved. "But I want you to know that whatever you decide, you have support. You have a family now in the intelligence community, and that includes people who will always watch out for your welfare." They reached Thompson's office, where Martinez had arranged for additional materials that painted a fuller picture of Rebecca's life and work. There were photographs from training exercises, commendation letters from various supervisors, and even personal items that had been recovered from her final assignment. Among these items was a small digital recorder that contained voice messages Rebecca had left for Emily, recorded during quiet moments throughout her final mission. Thompson had kept these recordings classified for over 2 decades, waiting for the day when Emily could hear her mother's voice speaking directly to her. She made these knowing she might not survive the assignment, Thompson explained, as he set up the secure playback device. Intelligence operatives often record personal messages for family members when undertaking high-risk operations. Emily's hands trembled as Thompson activated the player. After a moment of static, her mother's voice filled the room. Warm, intelligent, tinged with both love and sadness. "My darling Emily, if you're hearing this, it means I won't be coming home to watch you grow up. I want you to know that every decision I made was motivated by my love for you and my hope that you would inherit a safer world. I know your grandmother will raise you to be strong and kind, the way she raised me. I hope someday you'll understand why I had to make this choice, why protecting others was worth the risk of not being there for you. You are the best part of me, and I carry your memory with me everywhere I go." The message continued for nearly 10 minutes, with Rebecca sharing memories of Emily's early childhood, expressing hopes for her future, and providing guidance for navigating life's challenges. She spoke about the importance of education, the value of helping others, and the strength that comes from understanding one's heritage and purpose. When the recording ended, Emily sat in stunned silence, processing the sound of her mother's voice for the first time in her conscious memory. The woman speaking on that digital recorder was brilliant and articulate, but also unmistakably loving and maternal. "There are 6 more recordings," Martinez said gently. She made them throughout the final months of her assignment, updating them as circumstances changed. "Would you like to hear them all, or would you prefer to take them with you to listen privately?" "I'd like to take them home," Emily decided. "This is a lot to absorb all at once." Thompson nodded understandingly. "Emily, before you leave, I want to make sure you understand something important. Your mother's death was not in vain, and your life has meaning beyond what happened to her. You've already accomplished remarkable things on your own merit. The scholarship was just an opportunity. Everything you did with that opportunity was your own achievement." Over the next hour, they discussed practical matters: how Emily could access her mother's military benefits, what security protocols she would need to follow when discussing classified information, and how to maintain contact with Thompson and Martinez going forward. The bureaucratic details felt surreal after the emotional revelations of the day, but Emily understood their importance in establishing her new relationship with her mother's legacy. As the afternoon sun began to cast long shadows across Fort Braxton, Emily prepared to leave with a completely transformed understanding of her identity and family history. The manila envelope she had brought now contained copies of her mother's service records, contact information for other operatives who had worked with Rebecca, and an invitation to attend the annual memorial service for fallen intelligence personnel. "One more thing," Thompson said as they walked toward the base entrance. "Your mother asked me to give you something else when I found you. She wanted you to have this." He produced a small wooden box, worn smooth by years of handling. Inside was a simple gold ring set with a small sapphire, Rebecca's engagement ring from Emily's father, a man who had died in a construction accident before Emily was born. "She wore this throughout her final assignment," Thompson explained. "She said it reminded her of the family she was fighting to protect and the future she hoped you would have." Emily slipped the ring onto her finger, feeling another piece of her family's puzzle fall into place. The metal was warm, as if it had been waiting 23 years to return to where it belonged. Standing at the gates of Fort Braxton, Emily turned back to look at the base where her mother's story had been preserved and where her own story had finally found its missing chapters. The general who had walked past her that morning was now a permanent part of her life, a guardian who had kept faith with a dying woman's final request. "Thank you," she said simply, "for everything, for never giving up on the promise you made." Thompson's military bearing softened into something more paternal. "Your mother was right about one thing. You're not alone in this world. You never were. It just took us too long to find each other." As Emily's taxi pulled away from Fort Braxton, carrying her toward the airport and back to Seattle, she clutched the wooden box and the recordings that would help her finally know the extraordinary woman who had given her life. The promise made 23 years ago in the chaos of a classified operation had finally been fulfilled. But more than that, a new chapter in the Chen family legacy was beginning. 6 months later, Emily stood in her grandmother's former apartment in Seattle, now transformed into a combination living space and memorial to her family's hidden history. The walls displayed her mother's military medals alongside photographs Thompson had provided from Rebecca's training days and overseas assignments. The silver locket sat in a place of honor on the mantelpiece, next to a framed copy of her mother's final letter. Emily had made her decision about the intelligence community's job offer. Starting Monday, she would begin work as a senior cybersecurity analyst for the Department of Homeland Security, specializing in protecting critical infrastructure from the same kinds of threats her mother had fought against. The position came with top-secret clearance and the opportunity to work directly with the teams that continued Rebecca's mission in the digital age. Thompson had become a regular presence in her life, calling every few weeks to check on her adjustment and occasionally sharing new stories about her mother that had emerged from declassified files. More importantly, he had connected her with a network of intelligence professionals who had known Rebecca personally, creating the extended family she had always unknowingly needed. The most profound change came from listening to her mother's recordings. Each message revealed new aspects of Rebecca's personality: her dry sense of humor, her concerns about leaving Emily behind, her absolute certainty that protecting innocent people justified the personal cost. Emily had transcribed every word, creating a written record that helped her understand not just what her mother had done, but who she had been as a person. The final recording, made just days before Rebecca's death, contained a revelation that completed Emily's understanding of her own purpose. "I hope someday you'll choose to continue this work, not because you feel obligated to honor my memory, but because you understand that protecting others is one of the highest callings we can answer. The world will always need people willing to stand between darkness and light, Emily. I believe you have that strength within you." Standing in her apartment that evening, Emily realized that the general who had walked past her on that bench outside the commissary had done more than keep a promise to a dying woman. He had helped her discover that she was exactly where she was meant to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do, carrying forward a legacy of service that connected her to something larger than herself. Outside the secure conference room, life on Fort Braxton continued its military rhythm, but for Emily Chen and General Marcus Thompson, everything had changed. A promise kept, a legacy honored, and a family connection restored after 23 years of separation. The daughter had found her mother's path, and the guardian had finally fulfilled his sacred duty. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.